What if we told you that Man of Steel, the Superman movie from 2013, is outpacing James Gunn's Superman in ticket sales, and not by a little? A number of channels and articles are all discussing whether or not Superman is woke or divisive or good or bad. There's something way bigger to talk about. Let's talk about the box office and the brand new numbers right now. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Take a look at this from Marvin Montanaro. Who's that? Out of thatparkplace.com. James Gunn's Superman could lose to Man of Steel in opening weekend box office according to projections. Oh no. And as we get ready to go into this one, I want to say we're not even adjusting for inflation. 12 years ago, Man of Steel kicked off what would eventually become the Snyderverse with a respectable $128.7 million domestic box office opening weekend for a Superman film. Now, projections for James Gunn's rebooted Superman suggest it may not even reach that benchmark, despite having every modern advantage in its corner. Now, I haven't gone back, Marvin, and looked, and maybe you have this in the article. I can't tell you how much more expensive movie tickets are, but I would guesstimate right now it's something like double. And I pay attention to this stuff. We talk about it all the time. I'm going back in my memory. I bet they're at least 40% more expensive today than back then, 12 years ago. What say you?
We do adjust for inflation. Later in the article, it is adjusted for inflation. So Man of Steel made about 127 or 128.7 million in its opening weekend, counting the Thursday previews, which originally they did not. When Box Office Pro put this out, they were only counting the Friday to Sunday. However, adjusted for inflation, it is 174.5 million in 2025 dollars.
Holy moly! You're telling me that adjusted for inflation, Man of Steel earned $174.5 million. Well, ladies and gentlemen, how is the DCU and James Gunn, how are they going to do? For that, we go to Box Office Pro. Let's take a look at it now. This is just breaking. Weekend preview: Superman soaring to a $115 million plus domestic debut. Now, that $115 million plus is not as impressive now that I know that Man of Steel pulled in 174.5 adjusted for inflation. And what that means is that if you run the math, folks, something like 33% more people, okay, because we care about butts and seats, 33% more people went to go see Man of Steel than we expect will now go see Superman 2025.
And I'd like to point out, just to say, Man of Steel is the kickoff of a cinematic universe that failed.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. I am not telling you which movie is better or worse. In fact, I have not, as of the recording of this, I have not seen Superman 2025 yet. Of course, I've seen Man of Steel, but I am going to see Superman 2025 within the next 24 hours to prepare for a spoiler review. So I can't tell you if it's good, bad, ugly. I don't know. Some of my friends say it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Others of us say they wish the movie was already dead on arrival. But in terms of box office and in terms of audience interest, what the media is telling you simply isn't true. This isn't great because it's tracking 33%, something like that, behind the Man of Steel movie. And so now what we have to ask as a panel is, why? Derek, I want to start with you. Why is Superman 2025 tracking even before we're into, the full-blown release? Why is it tracking behind Man of Steel?
There's a lot of reasons for this. I'm going to be somewhat fair to Superman 2025 compared to Man of Steel. Man of Steel came out at a time when superhero universes were kind of just getting started. We had just got through with the Avengers, right? Marvel had put together its first phase, and that was over in 2012 with the Avengers. And people might have had a little bit of hope and excitement for a superhero universe coming with DC. You had Henry Cavill, who at that time everybody wanted to see as Superman. So you had something working in the advantage of superhero universes. We are now in 2025 where Marvel has just went on one of its worst runs ever. And people are not feeling this. We hear superhero fatigue all the time. And I think people are just kind of tired of it. And this is more of a wait and see movie rather than we can't wait. Let's rush out and let's go and check it out. I think that's playing into this, as well as the fact that this is a very divisive movie because James Gunn is a divisive director. And a lot of people did not want to see Henry Cavill, lose his position or lose the role of Superman. So I think this movie has a lot working against it in a couple of phases. But I do also think that in 2013, we were living in a different time for superhero movies where people were more excited about them than they are right now.
Right. And if you're trying to relaunch something, you're not pulling the kind of numbers, especially when you look at inflation. Okay. So here's the thing I would say, and panel, feel free to disagree with me. I would say that if we're talking about Superman and we say that it's divisive, which it is, it absolutely appears to be a divisive movie. If it's divisive, it's a fail. Because this is the kind of movie that you can't be divisive with. Like, nobody goes back to Iron Man and says, boy, that was a divisive movie, but it started the MCU in the right way. Wizard, take it away. Is it a failure if Superman starts off dividing people?
Oh, absolutely. And this movie can't afford it. Warner Brothers as a studio cannot afford division on this. We were told, and I know you guys have talked about it on this channel, other channels have talked about it, other news outlets have talked about it. This was supposed to be the Barbie for Warner Brothers, both in marketing expenditure and big push. The studio can't afford it because that'll be the end of the DCEU if this doesn't, or the DCU if this doesn't explode at the box office. But playing on what Derek said with the superhero fatigue, I think it's here, but there's also movie theater fatigue, which is another thing that people just aren't talking about. And it's not even the theater's fault, although the theaters are slimy and disgusting and unclean, and they deserve to close, frankly, in my opinion. But people have to be given a reason to go to the theater. And it's not Superman's fault alone that people aren't interested in going to the theater. Marketing budgets, or marketing productions are terrible. But the movies that are being made today are terrible. Most of the movies that we've all seen, that we've all covered on our shows and through these panels, we can watch them on streaming. There's nothing worth going to the theater for. And then you look at the marketing for this film, which has been nothing but like, that's the best way to describe it. It's a sound effect. It's not even, you can't even put words to it of how ineffective the marketing has been. I look at this guy, I stopped watching the trailers. I haven't watched the clips. I've seen the photographs. I've been almost disappointed with how they've been promoting this. I don't see Superman. I don't see it. Now, I haven't seen the movie yet. I'm going tomorrow like Pro. I haven't seen the movie yet myself. I hope to go in completely wowed. I want to come out and say I was totally dead wrong. This movie was great. I want to say that because I'm a Superman fan. But I just don't see it. I don't believe it. You haven't earned me. And as a Superman guy, I'm the easiest to earn. So I'm like, this should be a home run. And the fact that it's coming in as divisive and the general population, you don't need the comic book fans. The comic book fans are going to be divisive no matter what. You need the normal folks to be thrilled to go to the theaters, and they're not.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
So let's talk about you. And you're right, Wizard. I'm thinking back through the movies that have come out, and outside of F1, everything has kind of been a disappointment, right? Like, I was thinking about this earlier today. Where is my Back to the Future for the 2020s? Where is my Ghostbusters? Where is my big movie that nobody saw coming that just hits the silver screen and we all go, wow, you got to go see it? We haven't had that. There's not. We need that. Honestly, like, as a society, we need it.
The last one I remember was Godzilla -1.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
but yeah, that was done on a
two
tiny
original
budget.
Titles that you just named. You named Back to the Future. You named Ghostbusters. Original things that Hollywood isn't doing anymore. Everybody's tired of going to movies for another reason. It's the same old remakes, reboots, sequels, prequels, spin-offs. We're tired. All right. I have seen a lot of the movies that are already out because it's a sequel to the previous movie that just came out. So if you want to bring back the feeling of Ghostbusters as something that just captures everybody's imagination, or Back to the Future, Hollywood's got to get back to making original stuff, and they're not doing that. And so a lot of people are just like, you know what? I've already seen, a lot of the movies. Like I'll give you Ballerina, for instance. I actually enjoyed Ballerina, but it's just John Wick in a skirt. That's really all it is. So I've seen John Wick already. I don't need to see another John Wick. I've seen all right? So why not just give us new things, Hollywood? They don't want to do that. They want to play off of what our nostalgia, and that's another big issue. Superman has been done how many times?
Even Ballerina was like, we didn't need this. I didn't need to drive to the theater for it. I saw it opening night, and it's like, I didn't need to see Ballerina. I've seen the first 4 John Wick movies. This changed nothing for me. Final Destination, everybody was praising it. You had Valiant Renegade was praising it. I was laughing in the theater. I thought it was a joke. I'm not a big Final Destination guy, but I was sitting there laughing. And then people are like, no, this is serious. This is serious? What? Lilo and Stitch? Now that was a joke. Come on now. Thunderbolts? Come on now. Like, these are the blockbuster. Karate Kid Legends? After we just had closure with Cobra Kai? What are you doing, Hollywood? This is a joke.
Let me give you an idea of what I think's going on. And then I'm going to go to Lauren for the next question. But I think, now this is me pondering out loud, but I think that Hollywood knows that audiences don't trust them anymore. So the only way to get people back through the door is to give them something that they already know is wonderful because of the characters. And then over and over, we go back to see the characters return, and we walk up and we go, eh. And then that drives some level of revenue. But if they come out with an original, with a few exceptions, like if you convince us, hey, it's going to have proper masculinity, you'll get people to go. But most of the original IPs, what happens is, I think the audience looks and says, don't trust them. All they do is make this nonsense slop that only appeals to the coastal elites. I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to waste my money. Lauren, is that how you see it? The spiral, the pattern we're in right now?
It's part of it, but it's not all of it. I think a lot of it is that in Hollywood, they're beholden to the consultant class, and they tell them that what people want are remakes and sequels, and that's the safe bet to make. It's safer than doing an original property. And so they march in lockstep, and they do this. It's the same kind of thing that they've done with the streaming services. And they all have this idea that they're going to control their content the way Disney used to with the Vault, and they're just going to own all the revenue. They take away the physical media, and they force you to try and subscribe to these things. And it's killing their revenues. They've lost their multiple revenue streams. They have declining returns all the time, and nobody is willing to break the cycle. Now, if one studio does so, if one studio throws up their hands and says, you know what, our streaming service isn't working, we're going to go back to physical media, we're going to go and make the movies that you want, and they're rewarded for it, suddenly everybody else will do the same. And the consultants will start saying, well, there's the ticket, here's what you need to do. But until one of the studios decides that they're going to take that risk, they're all just going to keep walking off the same cliff.
Marvin, how much does this thing have to make to save face? So, I mean, we're going to talk about this. There's no way, as purveyors and surveyors of the news, there is no way that we can run a website and write articles and not cover the fact that it now looks like it's going to come in under Man of Steel adjusted for inflation. We got to talk about it. It's newsworthy.
Yeah.
How much does it save face, though?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think that it would need probably $150 million domestic opening in order to save face against Man of Steel in this situation, which even then would not beat it adjusted for inflation. But I don't think a lot of people look at that. The movie itself, reports have stated, and this is coming from the Hollywood Reporter. This is not coming from us or from any other new media outlets. Hollywood Reporter has surmised that it's somewhere around 700 million will be the break-even point. I actually think it might even be higher than that. Maybe 800, 900 million as a breaking point. James Gunn has denied this, but that is because James Gunn is moving the goalposts because he wants to be able to make, $500 to $600 million on this movie and still consider it a success worldwide. But you just had Jurassic World, which blew the projections out of the water. Now, is it possible with all of the positive press that this has been getting over the last day that this is going to have a much better opening weekend than anyone thought? Yes, it's absolutely possible. And stranger things have happened. So I think the magic number is kind of around 150 for this, for it to really be considered, wow, this is a blockbuster. I think if it hits the 135 though, I think you could solidly call it a successful opening weekend.
So let's go through then the history of Superman movies, at least in modernity, and talk about where we think this will land if the projections are accurate. So again, going back to Box Office Pro, it says Warner Brothers has had a hard time reviving the magic from Richard Donner's classic 78 Superman. 2 different iterations of the superhero have graced cinema screens since Reeve left the role, neither of them producing a Superman-specific sequel. Here are the box office results of recent Superman movies. Now pay attention to the opening domestic weekend versus the overall domestic haul. You're going to see a pattern here. Batman v Superman, 166 opening, ended with 330. Man of Steel, 116 opening, ended with 291. Justice League opened with 93, might as well say 94, ended at 229. Superman Returns opened with 52, ended with 200. The 3 most recent Supermans essentially stayed between a 2 and a 3X. Superman Returns was a 4X, but a much smaller domestic opening. I point to that to say this. If Superman opens at 115, I think it's safe to say that it pulls a 2 to 3X based on history. And if it pulls a 2 to 3X, then we're looking at that getting somewhere in the vicinity of 350 on the domestic side. You say, well, if worldwide matches domestic, we're at 700. And now I think that's probably looking like the most likely outcome here is somewhere between 600 and 800, depending on how it legs out. But I think you can safely say now it's a $600 to $800 million worldwide film. Fantastic Four is going to have some kind of impact. We don't know yet. We'll find out how Jurassic World Rebirth does in its second weekend. That will have an impact. But that's how I see this playing out. And I don't know. I think going into the summer, we all thought Superman of the summer slate, it was the one that had the greatest opportunity to hit $1 billion. Vash, it's probably not going to come close to $1 billion now. Is that embarrassing to DC? Does it hurt them?
I think it does hurt them a bit. I mean, there's a lot riding on this film. That's the thing. That's the thing that makes this so significant. At least these 2 superhero films that we're seeing in the upcoming slate, that being Fantastic Four and this 2025 version of Superman. Superman, this is, for I think DC and for Warner Brothers, this was going to be the launch of a new DC extended universe for them. And so there is quite a bit riding on this particular picture. And also, too, this will also inform, I think, Hollywood going forward, whether or not these comic book movies are viable in the same way that DA spoke about actually back in 2012, 2013, when Man of Steel was actually produced. The environment was far, far different. So it's kind of like, well, if you produce a Western and release it at the height of the Westerns, I think even that same movie is going to look a lot differently on in terms of box office at the tail end of that genre, right? When it had when we saw a lot of Westerns actually being produced by the United States. So we look at something like this, and I think they were really looking forward to this making $1 billion and really ushering in a new era for comic book movies and riding that wave and using that to propel other projects. At 700, 800, it's not great. It could leg out, though. You could have something where, I think Vague Wizard is right, the recent slate has just not been very good at all. But if you can convince people to come into the theater based on good word of mouth and everything like that, this could leg out. I think you have a populace that's just, I think they're looking at Fake Wizard's argument and they're going, yeah, I'm going to just see it on streaming unless it's really, really good and gets me in there. Is that this film? Doesn't sound like it is.
I'll throw one more thing out there to really get us in trouble. Everybody ready to step into the danger zone with me?
Yeah, why not?
Oh boy, Marvin loves being there.
I'm already there.
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Not based on Superman. Superman is one of the biggest characters on the planet. Spider-Man's up there in terms of superheroes. Batman's up there. Superman's up there. If James Gunn pulls in $845 million on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and can't come close to that number with Superman, I'm telling you right now, David Zaslav has to be furious. And investors at DC aren't going to be happy with this one.
And also, this was supposed to be $1 billion.
Yeah.
This was supposed to be $1 billion hit, and it wasn't.
That's right.
Is the DC history, though, bringing this down in a way that, Guardians of the Galaxy, at least on its third outing, earned a lot of goodwill? Is that the differences we're seeing here? I know it's not going to be a good excuse for David Zaslav, but
the first Guardians did a $94 million opening weekend, which is within striking distance of the projections that Superman has right now. And that was an unknown property.
I think there's an easy rebuttal for this, though, and that is that Superman is a little bit out of alignment with the times. Superman is the big blue Boy Scout who has the heart of gold and is a little bit dorky. And we're in a very cynical time frame where a lot of people don't like Superman because he's invincible. That he's just kind of passe as something that you see in modern entertainment. And also, Superman doesn't align with James Gunn's sensibilities.
I think that's the one.
He does for Guardians, but he can't do earnest. He can't do sincere. There's always a little bit of that cynic in him that doesn't let him have the sincere moment. And I think that's part of why you've got a misalignment here.
I will say one thing, Lauren. Trust me, this Superman is not invincible. This Superman basically has the first 20 minutes of RoboCop for 90 minutes of this movie.
Are you telling me he's wearing kryptonite undies?
He doesn't have to.
What I'm getting at
Really?
is that that's part of why it doesn't work, is that if you're going to do Superman, as much as people complain about the fact that he's invincible, you have to be true to the character. Yeah. And if you're not being true to the character, the audience will reject it. They may not even know why, but they'll know that something is wrong here.
Something's wrong. All right.
There are always ways that people try to make Superman more relatable. In Superman Returns, I guess that was making him an illegitimate father. In Man of Steel, it was making him just basically a kind of a jerk. In this one, it is just making him a guy who gets dog walked by every villain that he comes in contact with. He is fed his own rear end for 90 minutes of this movie.
I'll tell you what, we start with Derek. Let me end with Derek. Derek, as we're discussing all of this with Superman, are we going to remember this in a year or two? Is this going to have a big impact on the future of cinema? Is it going to change the direction of the DCU? Or do you think this is kind of one of those things that we'll say, well, it didn't do great, but the rest of the movies came along and they cleaned it up?
Bro, no, I think this is a lousy start to the DCU. We'll remember it in a year because I think Supergirl is going to be out in a year, right? So Supergirl is going to remind us that we started out with this film. This movie needed to be a home run, and it's at best a long single that gets maybe stretched into a double. It's very, very mid. I don't think this movie is going to get people excited for the DCU. Everything that's coming after this just feels kind of, I don't really care. And yeah, I agree that James Gunn was probably the wrong person to make this film. That's it in a nutshell. He's the wrong person to make Superman. He probably will do good in other aspects of the DCU, but this film needed a different vision, different director. And
he would have been great at Teen Titans. If they'd given him Teen Titans, absolutely. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, because honestly, his Justice Gang stuff that he does isn't half bad. There's some goodness there, but just for Superman, nah, he's not the guy.
I even think having him as like the DC head could work if he brought in people that could help tell this overarching story. But having him be the one to do nearly every iteration here, or all of the major iterations, it's going to fall apart. It's not going to work out. This should have been an earnest. I think that's the word. You guys really nailed it. This should have been an earnest Superman film.
Yeah,
and it's
survivable, not incredible. That's what I would say. I'm hearing from you guys.
Yeah, it needed to be like they basically took the Snyderverse and they were like, do the exact polar opposite of that. the pendulum swung too far in the other direction, and what it needed to be was somewhere between these two films. And it's the nuance that we don't understand as a society anymore. Go ahead.
So what do we make of the fact that critically, at least according to Rotten Tomatoes, both the audience and critics by and large seem to like it?
Hold on. I got to answer that real quick. The critics, I don't care what
right.
Okay, but the audience, this is clever on DC's part, and I love that. I love the studios have figured this out by releasing a special premiere 2 days early.
Yep.
That you got to go through some hoops to get there. You make sure that the earliest audience reviews are fan-freaking-tastic, because only the people who are the most die-hard, ardent people, they can't wait to see it. And Lauren, you remember those bad Star Wars movies that you went into and it took 48, 72 hours for you to go, oh, I don't like it. I don't like it. I've tried to defend it. That's what they're hoping for.
Now, I don't want to go strictly off of Rotten Tomatoes. I threw that out there because the scores there are roughly in alignment, which you don't usually see.
Yeah,
but when I'm looking at the feedback on Twitter, it looks to me like people who are genuine Superman fans are legitimately split. It does seem to me, at least based on what I'm seeing, that you either really like this or you really don't. There doesn't seem to be a lot in the middle.
And as we said, that's the failure.
They can't afford it.
That's the failure, because if you split the audience, you split the box office. That's the problem. And so I think that what you're seeing on Twitter is more representative of how people really feel than Rotten Tomatoes. I just don't buy it. When I read X and I see our friends out there in the community divided about this, I say, well, I think that's the actual reception.
I think, if you look at critic lists, which I think is one of the best platforms to look at for things like this, it's literally like almost divided right down the middle. I think it's at like a 56% on critic list right now. People that love it and people that hate it. So that's why I always tell people, like, no, look at critic lists. It's a growing platform. They don't do the weird things that Rotten Tomatoes does. And as it gets bigger and bigger, you see critic lists right there, 56%. You're going to start seeing this. I think this is going to become the barometer for what actual fans have to say about movies in the future.
See,
You know what else?
I was just going to say, I think that there's an age factor too. This definitely skews more young Gen Z. I think there's a little bit of that as well working for this film. So if you're an old head like myself and you grew up with, Superman bed sheets back in the 70s, you have a different look at Superman because you grew up with Christopher Reeve. You probably watched the George Reeves Superman, when you were a kid, in syndication. You saw Smallville, you saw the Adventures of Lois and Clark. You've seen a lot of Superman before. And now you're coming into a completely different, like straight out of a Saturday morning cartoon Superman. And that might work for a lot of the younger audiences. I think kids are actually going to like this Superman a lot more than I did. I think they're going to just be like, hey, wow, this is awesome. And it's a very quick movie. It moves fast. It doesn't take its time and set things up and develop the characters and develop the story. It's just like bang, 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 bang. It just gets right to each scene. It just moves super quick. And I think that's going to work for a lot of the TikTok generation that with the short attention spans. I think it's going to work perfectly for them. So it might be interesting to see I would be interested to see what's the age demographic of the people that like this movie. I know there'll be some older people that do, but I bet it's more young.
I agree, Derek. You look at this movie. I don't know if you agree with me on here, since we're like the two that have seen it, but you're basically, this movie starts in the second act of a story.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. Like the beginning is like something happens at the beginning, and it's like, I would like to have seen what just happened, like just maybe rewind about 5-10 minutes and show me that, and then the beginning of the movie. They don't do it. And then they just speed run through like maybe the first like 15 to 20 minutes instead of slowing down, taking time to develop the moment. There's a lot of moments that happen fast and you're like, wait, what just happened? There's a lot of that. Go ahead. It moves at the pace of Superman the Animated Series, in the pace that it had to move to tell a complete story in under 20 minutes, but stretched over 2 hours. Facts. Exactly. So that might work for some of the TikTok kids that just want things in 2-minute clips anyway, and they don't want to really sit down and deal with story development, character development. Let's see Superman and Lois together talking and working things out. Nope, let's just get right to the next scene. If it works on their level, then they may be the ones that carry the DCU forward.
I think the thing that fascinates me about this is that there's lots of people that I respect who are often fellow panelists on here who are saying that they really like this movie. And yet Marvin called me last night, which, if you know anything about Marvin, I think he's called me twice in the entire 2-year history that we've been working with each other, depressed and talking about this movie, so
it's that bad.
No, Marvin, no.
I really didn't like it, Wiz. It was
No, if you didn't like it, I'm gonna hate it.
yeah. Oh no, my first thought, not my first thought, Wizard, but maybe like my 18th or so thought was, man, Wizard's gonna really hate this.
Well, folks, that's where we've got to leave it there for now. But we are going to continue to cover Superman, including a spoiler review, as well as, you know it, at the end of the weekend, we're going to show it, tell you whether or not this managed to eke out a win over Man of Steel, adjusted for inflation, because that tells us how many butts sat in seats, and the number of butts is the number of minds, and the number of minds is how well this performs in the culture.
Hey, Floral, guess what?
You put a fork in Pro's microwave again.
No, that was yesterday.
I don't know that what.
Oh, I've decided to give up on torturing Jonas.
What? Why? In the same way the cat sleeps like 20 hours a day, that was like your purpose.
I know, but I've decided there's bigger fish to fry.
Okay.
Like Lorne. I mean, think about it. Everybody loves him. He's a fan favorite, and frankly, he has almost no weaknesses I can find. Except that he's really smart.
So, you want to annoy the one panelist without a single flaw, because he's smart.
Yeah, like that winged statue at that fancy Paris museum thingy. I want to break the one thing that everyone loves most.
So, kind of like the opposite of Rachel Zegler.
Yeah, exactly. And I get to see her all the time at family reunions anyway.
You get to see Rachel Zegler?
Yeah. She's a total troll. Lives under a bridge, harasses billy goats, the whole 9 yards.
It all makes sense now.
Speaking of which, maybe she'll get me... Okay, I'm gonna call her on my... I'm gonna call her and see if she'll be in the next Indiana Jones. She should be the next Indiana Jones. That'll totally destroy Lord. He loves Indiana Jones.
Oh, that's cruel.
Hey, Rach. I've got a cool idea for you that involves a whip and snakes.
I love that description. It's perfect.
I know, right? Weird, as we always say.